Well, thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen, and I'd like to welcome you back to the conference. My name is Jacqueline Foster. I'm a member of the European Parliament. I am the Conservative spokesman, that's the British Conservative Party. I'm the spokesman on transport and tourism. Transport covers aviation, maritime, road and rail, and obviously the tourism industry, which is a little more profile since the Lisbon Treaty. I'm also Vice President of the Parliamentary Intergroup, which is called Sky and Space. My background was many years in the airline sector. Many of you here I know very well, and so I've always had an interest in that. And then for a number of years I worked for the aerospace, space and defence sector when I was outside the Parliament between two mandates, and I returned to the Parliament 2 years ago at the European election. So I'm just going to make some general points. We have a very marvellous panel, I'd say, today, a good cross-section of speakers, and we are obviously fairly limited, pretty limited on time, because we'd like to have a bit of time for questions, so hopefully you can make notes of anybody you want to ask a question to. And then obviously after this is the end of your day today, and then you'll continue tomorrow. So, as I said, I'll just make some general notes, and then we'll move on to our other guest speakers. Ladies and gentlemen, last year was the first time that we'd had the conference where I was actually invited to that. And I was delighted, of course, to be involved with one of the sessions. This one is Territorial Planning, Agriculture, Transport and Telecommunications. So that covers a huge swathe of topics, and hopefully the panel will reflect these areas. But as such, as I say, I was delighted to be able to participate in this 4th EU Space Conference, and I was delighted to speak on this panel. Europe's future in space and the opportunities it will offer its citizens is of paramount importance, and the European Parliament has a responsibility to ensure that space policy is considered to be a key policy area, and I think that's what we try and do. Sadly, however, we've seen huge neglect in this area by many member states over the years. In fact, despite the fact the UK has a very significant space programme, if we look at building satellites and other areas, it's a great shame that we didn't remain involved in launch systems and various other aspects of the space industry from many years ago. So there is a sort of shortage in that area, I think, across Europe and across the world, in fact. So we need to see how we address that. But without even knowing it, space forms an even greater part of everyone's life. Is it good? In the UK and across the European Union. As you all know, I don't have to tell you, but we have many visitors up here today. When we answer our smartphones, watch television, we have GPS in the car, we make online financial transactions, search for a map on the internet, or look up the weather forecast. We're most probably benefiting from space. So looking ahead, space may be used for many other things. Indeed, it's already used partially if you're looking at a holiday destination. Space tourism may be a pioneering industry. It'll be interesting to see what's happening in 30 or 40 years. Mind you, many of us probably won't be here. But in any event, so if we look more particularly at the transport sector, in my case, then the opportunities are endless and the potential is great. One programme which is particularly close to my heart, particularly when you look at the aviation sector, is Single European Sky. And one of the key programmes that we are obviously pushing and has been in the pipeline for a long time is SESAR. So if we look at traffic management and planning across Europe, what we want to do is obviously look at capacity. We want to be able to address some of the congestion problems. We want to look at the price of the ticket. When you, the consumer, want to fly from A to B, let's use fuel as efficiently as we can. And also we always have to remember that we are part of global competition. So our companies, whether it's in the UK or the European Union, we are global traders, we are global competitors, and we have to take every advantage that we can to compete on as level playing field as is possible. So if you look at projects like CESAR being introduced, we have to make sure member states are behind these sorts of projects, and we have to make sure that the public do understand what they are, and we move forward in that respect. On the rail sector, we know that satellites can be used to help trains run on time. Maybe we get leaves on the line sometimes, or we get a bit of snow, but clearly the benefits are great. And in addition, we look at, you've got your car, we're also looking at the way GPS is used to move you around if you want to divert away from congestion and various other things. And also eCall, we're looking at in the Parliament 112, which is when you have an emergency situation driving your car in Europe, that hopefully you'll dial a number, it'll all be GPS led, and you'll be able to get some emergency services to come and help you, or whichever nationality you are. The only concern I'd have as a politician, if you're looking at intelligent transport systems, is that we also have to make sure that these do not impose on your private life. It's one thing to be able to travel around from A to B, but we don't want Big Brother following you when it's not actually necessary. So it's one thing if you've got a commercial vehicle which has to be tracked, like a lorry, but if it's a private car, a lot of these things have to be done on a voluntary basis where members of the public would choose to have certain implements or devices in their car. I see my good friend Luigi Longoni over there from Italy. Buongiorno. And so there are things that have to be balanced, even though we know that the technology that's becoming available and will be available in the future will be a great asset to all of us. To conclude, because I'm going to wind up now, I think the space industry is one of the European Union's great success stories, actually. I know, as a politician, in these very straitened times with economies and governments having to cut back all over the place on quite necessary things, it is very difficult to have to raise the funds to build these big infrastructure projects. I think we have to welcome and commend industry who've been prepared to put their money where their mouth is in terms of public-private partnerships at times. So, and we have to support that. And we have to also welcome the amount of input from the SMEs, those small supply chain businesses which are crucial to all of our economies. So I think on that note, I will just say this, that I, and I think along with my other colleagues, cross-party in the Parliament, we do support a robust space programme. We are looking forward to see how all of this moves in the future. And so thank you again for coming to our Parliament today. I'm sure other colleagues earlier welcomed you, but I'm delighted to see everybody again. And I'm now going to hand over to our speakers, who unfortunately only have, again, 5 minutes each, because we have a limited time, and to allow a little bit of time for questions. So thank you very much on my opening remarks. And our first speaker following me is Alain Beneteau, who is the President of Nereus. Alain Beneteau, thank you.
Madame la
Vice President of the Sky and Space Intergroup, Mr. Chairman, first of all, I'd like to say that the Nereus Network is very pleased to be here again at the Conference on European Space Policy, and thank you very much for this opportunity to take the floor. So our vocation is based on two strands. So bring together European regional authorities to work towards developing applications from space technologies and promote their use. And second, develop dialogue between these regional authorities and the European institutions that are working on the definition of a European space policy. What I'm going to say is focus on the development of applications and services for citizens, and this has been referred to this morning. Now, in our daily lives of our citizens, space technology already occupies an important place through weather or mobility as a result of the GPS. Many experiments have been carried out showing the potential of the GMES program, and as well R&D projects and prototypes have been developed. So I would recommend that you take a look at the two brochures produced by Nereus on the GMES and GNSS applications. Having said that, we have to bear in mind the actual potential. And this is one of the problems in developing the use of space technology applications is the following. We have to decide which path we're going to follow so that these technologies become easily available and are part of innovative procedures. But we are very far from that indeed. What we see is that the actions undertaken to put the service providers in contact with end users, well, this has not been very satisfactory. Probably because the top-down momentum doesn't work, because the space technology is delivered as a turnkey technology to the players who are not aware of what they're being presented with. For this reason, many of these players feel that space technology doesn't concern them. Through the different projects, the Nereus network is today convinced that we have to have a different type of momentum and give priority to bottom-up actions over top-down. And it would be useful to mobilize the people in the field, looking at what they actually do and what they need. And once that has been identified, then you can find specific solutions in relation to what they're doing and their specific needs. It's important that local operators discover themselves, together with advice that they might receive, the added value of space technologies. Alongside the technological culture of industrialists and service providers, we have to also build a cross-cutting culture of services that can facilitate society. And often space applications are limited to certain areas that have industrial potential. And the advantages of space technologies actually concern the territories as a whole. And the regional authorities are best placed to take initiatives and create a certain momentum. So land planning, agriculture, transport, these are issues that have been dealt with at this session. And very convincing experiments have shown that local authorities can be assisted when they have problems as regards planning, reducing the digital divide, and to farmers as well when they have problems with irrigation inputs and so on. We have to have a type of living lab network, and with specific examples, and show in reality the added value of such applications and how easily it can be used. In parallel, we also have to make people aware, and particularly the decision makers and the potential players, they have to understand that space technology is there to help them, and we can hope that space technology becomes part of their toolbox to develop and implement economic development strategies in line with the specific social and environmental requirements. There are many organizations that are working on this. And if we look at the main aims put forward by the European Commission under the EU 2020 strategy, innovation, sustainable development, social inclusion, and we can see that through this cross-cutting approach, it can deliver good results. And in this way, Nereus Network hopes that the links will continue, particularly with the Committee of the Regions, CRPM, URSA, ESOA. And if all these efforts are pooled and the regional authorities incorporate what is on offer, this can help find solutions to some of their problems. In addition, there has to be a coordinated view of how the European funds should be used. And we welcome the deployment of regional innovation strategies by making use of structural funds within the regions. And I'd like to conclude by coming back to how the Nereus network can dovetail with European institutions. If we're talking about development of applications, the infrastructure has to ensure that these are financed. And we're aware of the concerns as regards the financing of the GMES program within the Multiannual Financial Framework 2014-2020. Many messages have been sent to the European Commission about this, and Nereus has been a part of that movement, and particularly the members of Parliament who sent a letter to President Barroso. At the same time, the regional authorities have also been called upon to send a letter to the President of the Commission. And referring to the conclusion of President Van Rompuy this morning, I hope that we've managed to convince you of the important role of the regions in the development of space applications.
Well, thank you very much to our first speaker, Mr. Beneteau. And I'm going to call on our second speaker now, but I hate to remind our speakers, but we have the translation services. They have to finish on time, the translators here. So I know it's a real discipline, but I have to ask you to stick to 5 minutes, so we do allow the audience to have a bit of time for questions. Thank you very much indeed. So the next speaker that we're going to listen to is Colin Painter, and Colin is Senior Vice President of Strategy and Business Development at Astrium. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you and good afternoon. I'll just talk very fast, I guess. It's a great pleasure to be with you today and share with you my thoughts on how satellite-enabled services, not going to talk about infrastructure, satellite-enabled services are playing a key role in underpinning the competitiveness of the parts of our economy covered in this session, and how I see this role developing over the coming years. Clearly, in the fields of planning and agriculture, satellites are already delivering time-critical information into the hands of farmers and town planners. And this is not a pitch for massive new investment in space. I think thanks to the joint investment, mainly from the EC, but also from industry into GMES, this space infrastructure is already in place and providing operational services to users across the world. The challenge now is to develop new applications to help respond to European society's emerging challenges and to sustain these services in the long term. At the local and regional levels, space services today provide a range of mapping services, including 3D modelling, that are enabling users to assess the situation on the ground and to monitor and predict change. The pre-operational GMES land monitoring service, GeoLand 2, is one of a successful example of this. Space data has long underpinned the knowledge base of our national geographical institutions to help to anticipate emerging threats to our national and man-made environments and to provide essential toolkits for crisis response. Many of the challenges we face today and tomorrow do not and will not respect national borders. Here, the global reach of satellites can offer a unique advantage. For instance, services for flood prevention and water quality monitoring, I think, can deliver real benefits to the European citizen and of course, in support of the EU's macro-regional initiative covering the Danube region. Satellites also have a key role to play in supporting the twin pillars of the common agricultural policy, boosting production and safeguarding the environment. One service in operation today, FarmStar, helps farmers irrigate and fertilise their crops more efficiently boosting crop yields and reducing spend on fertilisers, a boost both to the economy and the environment. In fact, FarmStar has just celebrated its 10th anniversary, and there's no reason why FarmStar couldn't be easily extended to each EU member state. Such win-win solutions for the economy and the environment should be encouraged in the next agricultural policy. Turning to the field of telecommunications, satellite technology can play an essential role in delivering the EU's digital agenda and its aim of connecting all European households to broadband by 2013. Satellites are a crucial complementary technology for users in hard-to-reach, often rural areas. New generation, high-throughput satellites already offer even faster speeds. But public investment in satellite broadband research and development remains essential if we are to keep pace with the fast-moving consumer demand for ever faster broadband speeds. A partnership between industry and the public sector is vital if satellites are to remain a crucial part of the mix of technologies that deliver the second objective of the EU digital agenda, i.e. to connect every European citizen with a 30 megabit per second broadband connection by 2020. So what do we need to take full advantage of our space capabilities? One way is to federate public demand at the European level, with a clearly identified single point of contact in each of the European Commission's DGs that use space-based services. For instance, I suggest that we're lacking within DG Info a unit that could inform end users of the added value of satellite broadband, especially in remote areas, and help better facilitate deployment of satellite broadband. Another important role is financing the development and deployment phase of space-based services. We need public seed corn investment to transform data received from satellites into a wide-ranging portfolio of operational services delivered to end users. In our view, this support could be achieved using existing funding mechanisms, such as the regional policy funds or cohesion funds, and by promoting their use for projects of economic benefit in the fields of planning, agriculture and broadband access. We'd also like to see the proper implementation of the digital agenda so that DG Info can help rural users access the satellite broadband services available today and help bring broadband to all. No one doubts now that space-based solutions are making a difference today and offering new services for the challenge of tomorrow. But there's a clear role for public bodies to step forward as pioneering users of space services so we can help the next generation of smart, space-enabled public policy services reach each European citizen. Space services offer a way to advance the knowledge and skills base in Europe, underpinning Europe's knowledge economy, stimulating new high-skilled jobs and creating new niches of European leadership in emerging export markets. All of these objectives are fully consistent, I believe, with the EU 2020 strategy. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Colin. That was a really interesting presentation again. So our next speaker is Vidal Ashkenazi, who's the Chief Executive of Nottingham Scientific Limited, and that is an SME, so that's comes under the category of small, medium-sized enterprises. So Vidal, 5 minutes, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Foster, for inviting me to your session, and I have been asked earlier to start my presentation on the role played by European SMEs in the space sector. According to the European Commission, 99% of all businesses in the European Union are SMEs. They constitute nearly 60% of the total economy. Today, I would like to concentrate in this introduction on small companies with, say, less than 50 employees and less than 10 million euro turnover, and their significant contribution to the space sector in Europe. The setup of small companies differs significantly from that of large corporations. In the space sector, several small companies have very close connections with research establishments and universities. Indeed, some of them started life as university spin-offs. This allows them to recruit many talented PhD, doctorate graduates. This generates a highly skilled and motivated office environment, which stimulates creative thinking and encourages the development of new techniques and novel technologies. Some of these can be developed further and turned into marketable prototypes much quicker due to the flexibility enjoyed by such small SMEs in comparison with large companies. Once this is achieved, these small companies have to team up with the so-called big boys, who alone have the ability, capacity and funding to turn these prototypes into mass production and marketable products within their own companies. Nevertheless, a very small number of university spin-off small companies can move ahead quicker and start increasing their size and turnover substantially and significantly, subject to the full backing of their government and securing the corresponding financial support. One of the best examples is SSTL, Surrey Satellite Technology Limited, which came up with the concept of building small satellites with inexpensive, off-the-shelf components and corresponding low prices. They ended up building the first test satellite of the Galileo project, GOVA, and subsequently winning a contract as part of a consortium for the first batch of the so-called Galileo FOC satellites. Another such company is Avanti Communications, which from small beginnings are now a leading European operator of satellite communication services and have recently launched their own Hylas-1 satellite. A third such company, with which I am rather very familiar, contributed to the early conceptual phase and to the IOV development phase of the European Galileo project, in collaboration with the big companies. Similar early ideas were also proposed for GMES, the second most important European global project, still under development. The same small company was also involved with proposals for the European GNSS Evolutions Programme, EGEP or EGEP, at the European Space Agency ESA, bearing in mind the development of the new US GPS-3 system. But lastly, and most importantly, when the Director General of ESA came up with the IAP, Integrated Applications Promotion concept, this small company was awarded a first contract to develop the concept, leading not just to a combination of the various space technologies, such as Earth observation, SATCOM and SATNAV among themselves, but also to combining these with existing and corresponding terrestrial technologies, potentially leading to new services, for example, in railway modernization. Such small companies are now busily involved in developing new combined technologies to improve safety-critical transportation, such as railways and civil aviation. This will be followed with new ideas and technologies to improve resilience against jamming and spoofing of satellite signals for malicious and/or illegal purposes, thus contributing substantially not only to the economy of Europe, but also to the safety and security of its citizens. Madam Chairman, I was given only 5 minutes. I have to stop, but I will be delighted to answer any questions, especially on safety critical transportation. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Vidal, for a most interesting speech. And all the speakers on the platform, there may be particular points they've not had a chance to raise, but hopefully any of those points can be raised during questions. But thank you very much indeed. Our next speaker is David Wilkinson, and he's from the European Commission, and he's the Director of Scientific Policy from the Joint Research Centre. He does specialise in the field of agriculture. So, David, you have 5 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chair. And ladies and gentlemen, what I'd like to do is give you a concrete example of how the Commission is indeed every day using satellite-enabled services in carrying out its work. And as the Chair said, I work for the Joint Research Centre, which is the Commission's in-house science service. And for many years, we've been involved in the area of agricultural monitoring and crop yield prediction. Now, at this very moment, the issue of food security is very high on the agenda. We have, as you know, we've passed 7 billion population in the world. That is continuing to grow very rapidly. And although crop production techniques have improved over the last years, we're still in the situation that there are over or around about 1 billion people on the planet who are hungry. And from one year to the next, that number can change, and it changes to a significant extent because of price volatility. It went up by round about 100 million people during 2008, and entirely due to crop price volatility caused by various effects on the market. And in fact, it's crucially important, if we're going to tackle the issue of volatility, to have accurate and well-agreed predictions on what crop yields will be throughout the world. In fact, the JRC has been working with our sister DG, DG Agriculture, for some 20 years on predicting crop yields inside the European Union. That's very important, in fact, for the management of the common agricultural policy. But it becomes now increasingly important to look at the entire world's crop production. In fact, at the G20 summit in Paris this year, it was agreed that there would be 2 new initiatives at G20 level. One is something called the Agricultural Market Information System, and the other is the Global Agriculture Geomonitoring Initiative. And it's that Global Agriculture Geomonitoring Initiative which is going to require continuous access to high-quality satellite data. And in fact, the way crop yield prediction systems work is they take meteorological data, of course, but also up-to-date remote sensing data on an appropriate resolution, looking at the individual crop types that are actually growing in the various parts of the world. And then using sophisticated modelling, including the biology of the individual crops, how they respond to land use and so on, we can actually predict to quite high accuracy what the yields are going to be some months in advance. Now, if we can if we can extend that system from the European Union to the whole world, and there are some plans now to do that, working with the FAO, as well as our colleagues in DG Agriculture here, and various other international crop yield prediction groups in the United States, China and elsewhere, then we would have a basis which we think will make an important impact on reducing unwanted price volatility. There'll be considerable investment in the modelling activities put in over the coming years. We have good, solid commitments to that from the FAO and other parts of the world, but now we need to be able to rely on the continuous availability of the necessary satellite data. It's there at the moment, but we need to be able to continue to rely on that. I think that the key message I'd like to give is that the European Commission, and working increasingly in an international context, relies daily on satellite-enabled services, and we need to be able to see that that will continue in the future. Thank you very much, Chair.
Thank you very much, David. So our next speaker is also from the European Commission, and she specialises in the area of satellite communications and the digital agenda. I'd like to ask Megan Richards, please, to address you. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Foster. Well, I'll try also to be as brief as I possibly can. A number of speakers have already mentioned some of the aspects I was going to speak to, so the interpreters can ditch this part. You'll just have to jump as I try to go through some of the comments I want to make. But I think that, first of all, with respect to the digital agenda for Europe, which was adopted last year in May, I think the current financial crisis and economic difficulties underline even more how important that digital agenda is and how important it is to introduce and make sure that it works in Europe. And in the digital agenda, many of you will have seen it, there are a number of targets that are proposed for adoption. Mr. Painter has mentioned particularly basic broadband for European citizens by 2013 and the provision of fast broadband at 30 megabytes per second for all EU citizens by 2020. And we think in the part of the Commission that I work in that satellite has a very important role in contributing to meeting those goals. And of course also in the future we're expecting that satellite will be able to deliver even higher and faster speeds in the future, which will also help to provide good results for meeting the ultra-fast broadband goal of 50% of EU citizens by 2020. So at the end of last year, the Commission also adopted a broadband package, what we call the broadband package, and that included a communication on broadband, which in particular emphasized the importance of regional, local authorities, national authorities working together to ensure that these broadband goals are met, and I can't underline how important this is. A number of the speakers have mentioned the importance of regional and local authorities. The Committee of the Regions, of course, has an interest in this as well and has been participating in the discussions on broadband. So this is a very important element in the whole digital agenda for Europe. So as I said, in order to meet the targets, the broadband targets for Europe, satellite clearly has an important role, and we need solutions that go far beyond what are traditionally considered easy solutions. In particular, and Mr. Painter mentioned this particularly, we will clearly need to complement broadband access in regions or areas where it's impractical or uneconomical to install terrestrial-based solutions. And these areas include remote, rural areas, places that are inaccessible for either geographic or financial reasons to provide access. And we want to make sure that we don't have not a two-speed Europe, but a 100-speed Europe, because we'll have different regions all with different access, and we want to make sure that we provide sufficient access to these broadband provisions in order to ensure that European citizens have the access and potential for growth that is provided by using broadband. Many other countries, as you know, use satellite as part of their package for provision of broadband, and we think that this is useful and appropriate in Europe as well. Indeed, at the moment, there are about 10 million European households, mainly located in rural areas, that don't have basic broadband. And as we mentioned, the goal is to provide this basic broadband access by 2013. And satellite, of course, will be indispensable in ensuring that these solutions are met. And I think also that, and certainly the satellite operators and satellite industry mentions this as well, that the current speeds are perhaps adequate for the time being, but it's clear we have to think towards the future. This is what the digital agenda does. This is what the Europe 2020 strategy does. It's a long-term, far thinking. Perhaps 2020 is not so far away, but we have to think towards the future. We have to look at how demand for broadband is growing, and also to be able to provide solutions to this. If we look just at mobile devices and the amount of broadband they use and the growing demand for them and the nature of access and use of broadband, it's clear that if satellite is going to provide an adequate and useful part in the solution, it will also have to increase speeds. So in order to encourage and excuse me, supplement the way in which satellite solutions can be part of the overall picture, we have planned to include an action under the current work program of the Competitiveness and Innovation Program for 2012 and 2013 that would call for proposals to efficiently network regions that are interested in satellite communications to assess demand aggregation across different regions in Europe. In parallel, we're exploring with the European Space Agency through a study with the European Investment Bank the possibility to organize a Europe-wide action to propose access to basic services at the best possible economic conditions. In addition, there are resources under the current research framework program that are available under the call that is open now, and that call for proposals will close in early 2012. This includes a provision to provide support to industry for the design of very high-capacity satellite systems. And as I mentioned, this is an area where we think there's a lot of potential and we need to move further. And in the longer term, of course, satisfying the second digital agenda objective will require a new generation of very high throughput satellites if satellite is to continue to be part of the solution. And I understand that industry is currently working on these new generation satellites as well, both in the US, in Europe, and in other parts of the world. So we'll have to see how we can provide additional support to industry together with the European Space Agency under the next research and innovation umbrella of Horizon 2020. And there we're expecting a proposal from the Commission to be adopted towards the end of this month on the overall package for the future research program. And in that context, I wanted to mention also another area where I think there's...
Sorry to interrupt you, Ms. Richards.
Yes.
We'll have to wrap up to fit in the other speakers.
Excuse
if you
me?
can just sort of do your conclusions. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I couldn't hear you.
Sorry, could you just, because of the timing, could you just sort of come on to your conclusions?
I
Yes,
thought
thank
you were
you.
cutting me off and I had an extra 10
no,
seconds.
we've gone over. Well over.
The
Fine,
timing,
thanks, sorry.
the timing for Horizon 2020, the proposal is to be adopted at the end of this month. That's the planning. And the last thing I wanted to mention in the 10 seconds that I had was also the Connecting Europe facility, which has recently been adopted by the Commission, which is a proposal for the next multi-annual financial framework to provide energy, transport and telecom infrastructure and services in Europe, of which the package is 40 billion, plus 10 billion, of which about 9.2 is foreseen for telecommunications, infrastructures and services. And there's an area where it's not excluded that satellite also participate in that solution. So thank you very much for your time.
Thank you very much. Very interesting presentation there. So our next speaker is Jean-François Bureau, and he is from EU Telsat, and he will speak about the practical services offered by satellite telecoms to citizens and enterprises, etc. And he's the Director of Institutional and International Affairs. Thank you, Jean-François. 5 minutes, please.
I thank you very much, Mrs. Chair, and I would like to thank the organization for the opportunity we have to contribute to the discussion. By the way, many of the issues I wanted to raise have already been touched upon, and Mrs. Richards has mentioned a lot of things which we consider of very much important. So, in a few words, just to raise your attention to the contribution the satellites can provide to the telecommunication development, and especially to the implementation of the EU digital agenda. It's clear for us that in order to bridge the digital divide, the satellite will be needed. There are already 30 million people in Europe who are out of the digital age because of their location, because of the mountain where they live, and so on. So this contribution is needed. The industry and the satellite operators are very much committed to deliver the services which are needed for these people, and especially when we look at the development of their activities when they are small or limited companies. As you know, maybe Eutelsat, my company, has developed powerful satellite to deliver the internet, an high-speed internet capability. It is the second most powerful satellite in the world. It's called Carasat, and it's now fully operational since May. But as Mrs. Richards mentioned, we are already thinking about the future, and it will be a challenge to move from around 5 to 10 megabits, which is what we can do today, close to the ADSL speed, but moving to 30 megabits by second is a real challenge. So we shall look at it, and we are very much committed to work on it. From a second point of view, I would like to emphasize the importance of the tools which have been mentioned in order to make the best use of the satellite in the territorial planning. We still believe that in some cases the tenders, for example, are organized against the territorial networks more than the satellite capabilities, and, for example, the way the tenders are organized don't fit the way the companies can provide the answers. So it's sometimes a difficulty we can face. I fully share the idea that we have underspent EU funds, be they structural or agricultural, which could be used for broadband, and they are dedicated to this use. So we have already some resources which we can make a better use of, and probably having a single gate approach would help to this process. In a nutshell, when we talk about telecommunication, we strongly believe that the satellite is not the solution, but it is a needed solution in order to organize the supply. Without it, there are obvious needs which will not be covered. The need to fight the digital divide will not be accomplished, and at the end, I think that we show that the satellite is for the benefit of our citizens and to the benefit of our society. Thank you very much.
Well, thank you very much for a very concise presentation. That was excellent. Thank you for your help there, Jean-François. And we'll now go to Monsieur Philippe Glazner, and he is Vice President and General Manager for Governments and Institutions and SES, which is a private company, SATCOM operator. So he's just going to talk about the expectations of the operators from an EU policy in telecoms and services. So, Philippe?
Yes. Thank you, Mrs. Foster. So, as we have heard already today, actually, satellite communication services have become a significant contributor to the space industry, to the economic and social development, to global communications and interaction, as well as to public safety and security in the EU. Satellites today already serve more than 77 million direct-to-home households in Europe, and in addition feed programs in Europe into cable networks that serve many more millions. 1 out of 2 TV homes in Europe receives satellite services, be it directly or indirectly. Considering the current objectives of the European Commission as regards the digital agenda, I would like to stress that satellite is a necessary ingredient for future-proof hybrid solutions that can blend the reach and cost-effectiveness of satellite broadcast services, or TV, with the interactive capabilities of terrestrial networks. Directly reaching the end user, satellite combined with DSL or 3G or 4G dramatically extends the availability of the state-of-the-art multiplay services, which is to play a major role in the territorial cohesion, the preservation and the development of rural areas. Satcoms provide essential broadband services, as was mentioned earlier, that terrestrial networks cannot provide in rural settings, and all this within the time frame set by the Commission, namely 2013, with reasonable costs. And this is important, especially in areas such as territorial planning, agriculture, transport, energy and telecoms. For instance, satellite helps connecting schools. Satellite helps connecting post offices in remote areas where no terrestrial connection is available, be it in Europe, I mean Turkey is an example, Albania is an example, or outside. The use of broadband capabilities, together with video surveillance capabilities, also directly contribute to the development and the sustainability of large smart grid networks. This is becoming more and more important. In the context of private companies supporting national, European, worldwide institutional endeavours, just as an example, from January 2012 onwards, SES's global network will contribute to provide end-to-end telecommunications services to humanitarian aid workers around the globe within the first 12 hours of a crisis, including the shipment of all the necessary equipment. The emergency LU project mentioned earlier today by Commissioner Georgieva provides voice telephony and data transmission in disaster areas where all other terrestrial communication lines are down or out of service. This platform is a Luxembourg contribution to the UN and its World Food Programme and is the result of a PPP signed between a government, the Luxembourg government for instance, and private partners such as SES to the benefit of disaster relief missions. Since the first announcement of this network a few weeks ago, a lot of interest about similar service is fortunately emanating from various European institutions and organisations. In order to support growing institutional demand, SES, and I think I can also talk for other private operators mentioned this morning, invest in infrastructure continuity and expansion. SES invests more than 4 billion euros in satellite fleets between 2011 and 2014, which is 13 additional satellites and payloads from 2011 until 2014. A major part of this programme is earmarked for the European fleet replacement and extension. This continuous conveyor belt of satellite procurements of private satellite operators is offering the European Commission another key opportunity to use satellite telecommunications and embark hosted payloads to answer specific needs. As a perfect example of a working cooperation in this domain, SES was awarded 2 contracts for 2 EGNOS hosted payloads, which will allow the continuity of this programme and make the European Commission profit from the private sector skills in satellite procurement and also the operations. To summarise, satellite is an enabler of social and economic cohesion. Satellites are an essential communication tool when all other networks are down in disaster contexts. Satellites are available immediately at very reasonable cost, especially in areas where terrestrial technologies are inexistent or their deployment is not cost-effective. Commercial satellites are also an attractive vehicle to embark institutional hosted payloads and specific missions at a fraction of the cost of dedicated satellites. In order to terminate, let me tell you that we continue to advocate that the commercial satellite communication sector should be further included as an integral part of the future EU policies, such as territorial planning, agriculture, transport, space and telecommunications. We, and I believe I'm speaking for the entire industry, would be eager to contribute and participate further in such policies, working together to make Europe safer, stronger and more prosperous. I thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much, and thank you for the last two speakers as well for trying to keep to the time and even reducing their time, so I'm very grateful for that. Our final speaker is a good colleague from the Economic and Social Committee. It's Mr. Edgardo Ayosa, and he is a Director of Scientific Policy. I beg your pardon, no he's not. That's somebody completely different. He's the President of the Single Market Observatory, and he's the rapporteur in that committee on an opinion for a space strategy for the European Union and the benefits to its citizens. Yes. So you have 5 minutes. Thank you very much, and nice to see you over here in another building.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just want to introduce the role that the European Economic and Social Committee addressed to the space policy, and we think that is an irreplaceable strategic resource for meeting the EU's social, economics and security needs. Satellites and space technologies provide our societies with crucial services. They have direct impact on our everyday lives, and the space industry is a source of economic growth and jobs. Despite its limited size in relative terms, the economic, strategic and social importance of space is now fully recognized by everybody. It is impossible to imagine Europe as a region of well-being without the support and stimulus of its position as leader in the space sector. Space plays therefore a considerable role in the field of territorial planning, telecommunication and transport, issues that we are tackling in this debate. As regards those topics, let me say some words on the global monitoring programs, GMES and Galileo. GMES is the key to maintain the EU's independent capacity for collecting data and the information on the Earth system. Environmental information is of crucial importance. Look what happened in my country, in Italy, those last days. Torrential rains lashed Genoa and Italy's western coastline, triggering flash floods that killed at least 15 people as raging water uprooted trees and swept cars and furniture through the streets. Imagine a system that could prevent more efficiently those catastrophes. The committee strongly believes that the GMES is the instrument to support the decisions that need to be made quickly during man-made catastrophes and humanitarian crises occur. However, the ESC is extremely concerned that the GMES budget has not been included in the 2014-2020 multi-annual financial framework and calls on the Commission to identify the funds needed to stave off the programme's collapse. As regards Galileo, the other major flagship programmes, the committee estimates that this service will increase the application for positioning services, enabling remote guidance for vehicles, real-time monitoring of road congestions, indoor positions and guidance solutions. BSC takes note of the implementation of the Galileo programme so far. It acknowledges the results of EGNOS, which was the first European satellite navigation measure to improve the quality of the signal transmitted to the European territory by global satellite navigation system. The systems that emerged from Galileo and the EGNOS programmes represent the first major space facilities solely belonging to and managed by the EU. The committee underlines in its forthcoming opinion next December the benefits of these programmes for the EU across all sectors of the economy, such as transport, telecommunication, environment and security. We have also a lot of services for the citizens coming from these policies, such as public safety and emergency response, health and home-based services. About communication, everything has been said by previous speakers, so I want to pass to a very important issue for BAC that strongly supports space financing, and it is important to ensure continuity in this sector. In addition to being one of Europe's founding values, research is therefore critical to develop Europe's independent capacity in the area of key enabling technologies, which are needed to make its space industry competitive on the global market. EU investment in research must be made more effective through the establishment of a common strategic framework for research and innovation funding. We need a closer relation with ESA. But at last, I would like to underline the international cooperation in space must support the promotion of European values through space-based projects, focus on environmental protection, climate change and sustainable development. Yesterday morning I was in China, and coming from China in the television, I have seen the launch of the missile. The name was Shenzhou, the Divine ship. Shenzhou means Divine ship. It was bringing to the space some component for the space station, and the space station will be Tiangong 1, but it means in Chinese, Divine ships. We are fronting the vision of our Chinese colleagues and friends, so it will be very, very important to us to cooperate with all those people that have this kind of vision. Thank you so much.
Well, thank you very much for that interesting contribution as well. So I'm sure you've all found the contributions very useful, quite diverse across the panel. And we have, thank you to the panel, kept a pretty good time. We have got a few minutes for any questions for any members of the panel. So any hands up anywhere? If you can wave, and can you say who you are, please? And where you're from, and who you want to address your question to, unless it's a general one. Thank you. There's a gentleman at the back, number 680.
Thank you, Chair. My name is Wolfgang Steinborn from the European Umbrella Organization for Geoinformation. And I would like to ask maybe Mr. Wilkinson, but others representing the European Commission as well. Several speakers have highlighted the internal use of space technology in the European Commission for the implementation of its own policies, and that seems to be a regular use, to my impression, in practice since many years. So, and a number of times Earth observation was also mentioned, not only by Mr. Wilkinson. If this is so, I wonder why not the respective commissioners and the debate about the budget proposal for the MFF have not struggled harder for the inclusion of GMES. Thank you.
Well, that's a pretty complicated one, isn't it, on the GMES? I think I know where you're coming from. I'll just hand over to Mr. Wilkinson just for a brief response, please. Thanks.
Yes, well, thank you very much for that question. I mean, it's clear that in the Joint Research Centre, we're using space-based information for quite a number of applications. I mean, I mentioned just one, which was crop yield prediction, but we also use it for flood warning systems, for issues such as land use monitoring worldwide, and so on. And so it certainly does represent an important input to the in the definition of community policies. I won't address the second part of your question, that's not my job, but I can assure you that we do use space-based data quite extensively in our work. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure you'll understand why I didn't address the second part of your question, because it was probably a fishing trip. Don't know how that translates. I know there's a bit of controversy there. Another question? I think there was somebody near the back somewhere. No? No? Gosh, you've had everything answered. Yeah? No. Okay, it's been a long day. I think you've had a long day anyway, haven't you? So, look, thank you very much, all of you, for coming. You've got a very interesting day, those of you who are staying tomorrow, so there's some good topics again tomorrow. One of my colleagues, another Vice President of the Sky and Space Intergroup, will chair one of the sessions, Vladimir Remek, who was the first European astronaut from what is now the Czech Republic. Giles Chichester, obviously, is Vice President of the Parliament. Apparently you now have what's called on your a walking dinner. In English we call it a buffet. You might get the irony in a minute. It could be a running buffet, but I understand you're going over to the Committee of the Regions for that. I can't join you tonight, but have a splendid time. Hopefully I'll see many of you on other occasions. I've started to host a UK space group who come over from the UK to see what's happening in the European Parliament and the European institutions, and they're starting to come over on a regular basis. And I would recommend, ladies and gentlemen, those of you from other member states as well, who don't have a close contact with maybe some of their MEPs, also try and try and move in a direction where you are able to come over often and speak to them about the importance of the space industry in your member states as well. So have a marvellous evening, and thank you very much for coming today. Thank